Good evening, and welcome. Tonight, we enter the world of shadows, whispers, and ancient knowledge. This is the dark mythology sleep story of Odin, the All-Father, the god of wisdom, war, and secrets meant only for the brave or the doomed. In this story, we will follow Odin beyond the halls of Valhalla to the roots of the world tree, Yggdrasil, where knowledge is bought not with gold, but with pain, sacrifice, and silence. You will hear of 9 nights spent hanging between life and death, of voices that whisper from the darkness, and of truths that were never meant to be spoken aloud. This story is told slowly, calmly, and is designed to help you relax, let go of the day, and gently drift into sleep. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from tonight, and what time is it for you? Now, take a slow breath in and let it go. The ravens are watching. The wind is still. Welcome to the story of Odin. Wisdom has never been free. It has never been gentle. And it has never been given to those who are comfortable. Long before stories were written, before time learned how to remember itself, there was a god who understood this truth better than any other. His name was Odin, and what he desired was not power, not worship, not even immortality, but understanding. Tonight, you are not here to hear a tale of victory. You are here to hear a story of surrender. Because the greatest wisdom in the world was not won in battle. It was earned in silence, in hunger, in pain, hanging between life and death on the branches of a living tree. As you listen, allow your body to rest. There is nothing you need to do, nothing you need to solve. Let the story unfold slowly, like a dream that does not ask to be understood, only experienced. Ask yourself this, gently, without needing an answer. Why would a god choose to suffer? What could be so valuable that even a king of gods would abandon comfort, food, warmth, and certainty to obtain it? And what kind of knowledge waits at the edge of endurance, where identity begins to dissolve? Odin was not like the other gods. He did not rule from a place of satisfaction. Even as All-Father, even as the one-eyed watcher of worlds, there was a hollow space within him, a quiet, restless hunger that no feast could fill. He had seen too much to believe in peace. He knew that every age ends, every world breaks. Even the gods themselves would one day fall into silence. And in that knowing, a fear took root. Not fear of death, but fear of ignorance. To not understand the forces shaping existence. To face the end without insight. To rule without wisdom. That was the one fate Odin could not accept. And so his search began, not outward, but inward. Not through conquest, but through sacrifice. At the center of all things stood Yggdrasil, the world tree, vast beyond measure. Its roots drank from wells older than memory. Its branches stretched through realms unseen, binding gods, giants, humans, and the dead into a single living structure. Yggdrasil did not speak. It did not judge. It simply existed, patient, ancient, and aware. It was said that everything that ever was and everything that ever would be passed through its fibers. Time itself clung to its bark. and within its depths, hidden from language, lay the runes, the raw patterns beneath reality, knowledge not meant to be held lightly. Odin knew the price before he ever approached the tree. No gift could buy this wisdom. No bargain could unlock it. Only sacrifice equal to its weight. So Odin made a decision that no god had ever made before. He would offer himself, not to another being, not to a higher power, but to the tree, to existence itself. He would hang upon Yggdrasil, wounded by his own spear, without food, without water, without comfort, for 9 nights, 9 days suspended between worlds, watching, waiting, fading, not as a king, not as a god, but as something closer to nothing. Odin had ruled long before the decision was made, long before the rope was measured and the spear was sharpened. He ruled from the high seat of Asgard, where the halls were bright, and the voices of gods echoed with laughter, argument, and celebration. To many, he seemed complete, powerful, untouchable, a figure carved from certainty. But completeness is often an illusion seen only from the outside. Odin watched more than he spoke. His single eye missed nothing that moved through the 9 realms. Yet what troubled him most were the things he could not see. Futures blurred at their edges. Prophecies contradicted one another. Dreams arrived heavy with symbols that refused to explain themselves, leaving him awake long after others slept. The gods feasted, and Odin listened. The gods boasted, and Odin waited. The gods rested, and Odin wandered. He walked the borders of realms when others found comfort in routine. He stood at the edges of existence, where certainty thinned and questions grew sharper. Leadership weighed on him, not as pride, but as responsibility. Constant, pressing, impossible to set aside. Odin knew the gods were not eternal. He had seen the threads that bent toward Ragnarok, even if their final knots remained hidden from sight. He understood that strength alone would not be enough when the end approached. Weapons would fail, walls would fall, thunder would fade. Only understanding might endure beyond the breaking of worlds. This knowledge set him apart. While Thor trusted the strength of his arm, and Frey trusted abundance and growth, Odin trusted doubt. He believed questions were more valuable than answers, and that comfort was often the enemy of truth. Certainty, he suspected, was a fragile thing, easily shattered when reality refused to obey. This belief cost him sleep. When night settled over Asgard, Odin often remained awake, seated beside the fire long after it had burned low. Shadows moved slowly across the walls, reminding him that light only exists because darkness allows it. In those hours, silence spoke more clearly than voices ever could. He remembered the first sacrifice he had made for wisdom. The well of Mimir still echoed in his thoughts. The moment his eye was surrendered had been painful but clean. A trade, knowledge exchanged for loss. Clear terms, clear cost. He sent his ravens across the skies each morning, not to dominate the worlds, but to understand them. When Huginn and Muninn returned, perching upon his shoulders, their whispers filled him with knowledge, and with the heavy awareness of how much remained unsaid. Thought and memory could gather facts, but they could not reveal essence. And still it was not enough. The more Odin learned, the more aware he became of what remained hidden. Knowledge expanded the horizon of ignorance, revealing how vast the unknown truly was. Each truth uncovered revealed 10 more lying quietly beyond reach. This understanding did not discourage him. It sharpened him. Odin believed that meaning was not given by the world. It was forged slowly, painfully, through effort and through willingness to face discomfort without turning away. If the universe demanded payment for truth, then he would pay it willingly, whatever the cost. Even among the gods, Odin stood alone in this conviction. Frigg saw the weariness in him, though she did not speak of it. She understood that some journeys could not be shared, even between those bound by love. The distance between them was not absence, but necessity. Certain paths must be walked alone. There were moments, rare and quiet, when Odin wondered what would remain of him if the titles were stripped away. If he were no longer All-Father, no longer King, no longer Watcher. If the names spoken in reverence were allowed to fade, would there be anything left? That question lingered longer than any prophecy. Sometimes, standing alone beneath the stars, Odin imagined silence swallowing his name. He imagined a version of himself unknown, unnamed, unnoticed. The idea frightened him and drew him closer at the same time, like a door left slightly open. He noticed how power isolated as much as it protected, how reverence created distance, how being worshipped meant being misunderstood. The gods saw his authority, but few saw his longing. The halls of Asgard echoed differently now. Sounds faded faster. Conversations ended sooner. Even celebration felt temporary, like a pause before something unavoidable. Everything seemed to carry the quiet weight of impermanence. It was this awareness that eventually turned his thoughts toward Yggdrasil. Not ambition, not pride, but understanding. Before the rope was cast, before the vow was spoken, Odin stood as he had always stood. Powerful, respected, feared, surrounded by symbols of authority that no longer comfort him as they once had. The throne felt heavier. The crown felt quieter. The halls felt larger and more empty than before. All the signs of rule began to feel like echoes of something already passing. And yet beneath it all, there was a readiness, a willingness to let that version of himself dissolve. Because Odin understood something that few ever do. To gain what cannot be seen, one must be willing to lose what can. And so, long before the first night of hanging began, the sacrifice had already started. Within his thoughts, within his certainty, within the image of himself he was preparing to leave behind. The god was already loosening his grip. The fall had already begun. Yggdrasil was not a place one simply visited. It was something one entered. It stood at the center of all things, though no direction could truly lead to it. The world tree existed beyond distance, beyond scale, beyond the simple idea of location. Its roots reached into realms that had no names, drinking from wells older than memory itself. Its branches stretched upward and outward, piercing skies that belonged to different worlds at once. To look upon Yggdrasil was to feel small, not in body, but in certainty. The bark of the tree was ancient, scarred by time in ways no blade could imitate. Its surface carried the quiet weight of countless ages, layered with moments that had passed and moments yet to come. Time did not move along Yggdrasil. It rested there, coiled and patient. The tree did not grow. It endured. At its roots lay the great wells. One shimmered with memory, another with fate, another with the quiet pull of what must one day be. Their waters were still, dark, and heavy with reflection. To gaze into them was to risk seeing more than one wished to know. Creatures moved along Yggdrasil without sound. A serpent coiled endlessly near its deepest roots, gnawing slowly, eternally. A great eagle perched high above, watching the worlds below with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and vanish like mist. Between them, messages traveled, not in words, but in tension, in vibration, in the subtle shifting of the tree itself. Yggdrasil listened, not like a mind listens, like existence listens. Wind passed through its branches, though no sky to be named. Leaves whispered without language, brushing against one another in a rhythm older than thought. The sound was neither comforting nor threatening. It simply was. This was the structure that held reality together, not through force, but through balance, not through command, but through connection. Gods, giants, humans, spirits, and the dead were all bound to Yggdrasil, whether they knew it or not. Their lives brushed against its roots, their choices echoed faintly along its bark. Nothing escaped its reach, though few ever felt its presence clearly. Odin felt it. He had felt it long before he ever stood before the tree, in dreams that left him restless, in silences that lingered too long, in moments when thought seemed to pause, as if something vast had passed nearby. Yggdrasil was not sacred because it was worshipped. It was worshipped because it was unavoidable. Standing before it, Odin understood what words could not express, that the tree was not alive in the way beings were alive, and it was not still in the way stone was still. It existed in a state between becoming and remaining, holding all things without clinging to any of them. This was why the runes rested here, not carved into wood, not written in form, but woven into the structure of reality itself. The runes were not symbols to be memorized. They were patterns to be endured. Forces that shaped becoming, change, loss, and return. To understand them was not to control them, but to align with their rhythm. Odin knew this. He also knew that knowledge taken without readiness would destroy the one who reached for it. Yggdrasil did not test worthiness through judgment. It tested through consequence. Those who approached it seeking power found only emptiness. Those who demanded answers found silence. Only those willing to be undone could receive what lay hidden. The tree did not promise survival. It promised truth. As Odin stood near its vast trunk, the air felt heavier, as if breath itself had weight. Sound softened, thought slowed. Even intention seemed to loosen its edges. The world narrowed, not into confinement, but into clarity. This was not a place of fear. It was a place of honesty. Every illusion dissolved here. Every title lost meaning. King, God, Watcher, these were names given by others. Yggdrasil did not recognize them. It recognized only presence, only willingness. The branches above vanished into shadows so deep they seemed endless. Looking up, Odin did not see a summit. He saw continuation without destination. Looking down, he did not see a base. He saw depth without bottom. Between the two, existence hung suspended. It was here that Odin understood the final truth of the tree. Yggdrasil did not connect the worlds. It revealed that they had never been separate. This understanding settled over him slowly, like snow falling without wind. Everything he had ever sought, every vision, every fragment of prophecy, every unanswered question, pointed back to this place. Not as an answer, as a beginning. The tree asked nothing of him. It offered nothing to him. And in that silence, Odin realized the weight of what he was about to do. To hang upon Yggdrasil was not a ritual. It was not a bargain. It was an act of alignment. To place himself within the structure of reality. To become still enough that the patterns beneath existence could be felt directly, without interpretation, without defense. The tree would not protect him. It would not intervene. It would simply remain. And that was what made the sacrifice absolute. As Odin prepared, the worlds continued as they always had. Somewhere, battles were fought. Somewhere, children were born. Somewhere, stories were told beside warm fires. None of them polished. None of them noticed. Yggdrasil had seen countless beings come and go. It would see Odin come and go as well. Or not. The tree did not care which. Standing there beneath its vastness, Odin felt something rare. Not confidence, not fear. Acceptance, the kind that comes when the path ahead is clear, even if the outcome is not. Yggdrasil waited as it always had, silent, enduring, unmoved. And in that stillness, the space for sacrifice finally opened. The nights were drawing near. The decision was not sudden. It did not arrive like lightning, nor did it demand attention. It settled into Odin quietly, the way night settles over a land already growing dark. By the time he stood beneath Yggdrasil, the choice had already been made, not once, but many times, in many small moments of understanding. Still, this was the point of no return. The world tree did not ask him to continue. It did not urge him forward. It offered no sign of approval or warning. Its silence was complete, and in that silence, Odin felt the weight of responsibility shift fully onto himself. No prophecy compelled him. No voice commanded him. This was not fate, it was consent. Odin reached for his spear, Gungnir. The weapon felt familiar in his hand. Balanced, certain, precise. It had flown true in countless battles, never missing its mark. Yet now, it was not an instrument of victory. It was a reminder. Sacrifice must be real. Symbols alone would not open the path. Pain must be entered willingly. Loss must be accepted without resistance. He understood this with absolute clarity. The rope came next. Rough, unforgiving, ordinary. There was nothing ceremonial about it. No adornment, no beauty. Just a simple line meant to hold weight, to endure strain without breaking. Odin tested it once, slowly, feeling its texture against his hands. The fibers pressed into his skin. The sensation anchored him to the moment. This was not a dream, not a vision, not a metaphor. This would happen. As he prepared, thoughts surfaced, not in chaos, but in order. Faces, names, moments from ages past. Victories that once felt important now seemed distant, muted. Even his greatest achievements appeared small when measured against what he was about to attempt. He felt no regret, only a quiet awareness of consequence. To hang upon Yggdrasil meant surrendering more than comfort. It meant surrendering identity, time, control, the certainty that he would return unchanged. Perhaps that he would return at all. For the first time in many ages, Odin allowed himself to imagine failure without resistance. The tree would not save him. If his body failed, it would fall. If his mind shattered, it would remain broken. There would be no interruption, no mercy granted by status or name. This, too, was part of the offering. He positioned himself beneath the branches, choosing a place where the tree's presence felt most complete. Not higher, not lower, balanced between ascent and descent, between becoming and dissolving. The rope was cast over a branch that did not bend. Yggdrasil did not react. As Odin secured the knot, his movements were slow, deliberate. There was no hesitation in his hands, though his thoughts grew quieter with each passing moment. Breath deepened, muscles relaxed, awareness sharpened. This was the calm before surrender. He lifted Gungnir and pressed its point gently against his side, just enough to feel the cold certainty of it. This wound would not be fatal, not quickly. It was not meant to end life, but to remove comfort, to ensure that the body could not forget itself. Pain would keep him present. Odin closed his remaining eye. Not in prayer, not in fear, but in recognition of all he had been, of all he was about to lose. He thought of the question that had followed him for so long. What remains when everything familiar is stripped away? The answer waited ahead, beyond endurance. He opened his eye again and stepped forward. The moment his weight transferred to the rope, the world changed. Sound softened first, as if distance had grown suddenly vast. The air felt thicker, resisting movement. Gravity made itself known, not as force, but as constant reminder. Every muscle responded, every nerve awakened. The spear bit deeper. Pain arrived cleanly, without drama. It did not overwhelm. It clarified. The body understood immediately that this was not temporary discomfort. This was condition. This was reality now. Odin did not cry out. There was no audience. Below him, the roots of Yggdrasil disappeared into darkness. Above him, branches stretched endlessly into shadow. There was no direction left that promised relief. No orientation that suggested escape. Only duration. The first moments passed slowly. Breath measured itself. Heartbeat remained steady, though heavier. Blood moved. Thoughts remained intact. The god still knew his name. But something subtle had shifted. The ground was gone. With it, the illusion of stability. Hanging there, suspended between realms, Odin felt the final separation take place, not from the world, but from certainty. There was no longer a future to anticipate, only a present to endure. This was the threshold, crossed not by motion, but by commitment. The tree held him, not as a guardian, but as a framework. It did not comfort him. It did not resist him. It simply allowed the process to unfold. As the first night approached, shadows deepened. Cold crept slowly into his limbs. Sensation sharpened, then dulled, then sharpened again. Time began its long unraveling. Odin remained, not because he was strong, not because he was divine, but because he had chosen this fully. And choice, once made without reservation, becomes its own kind of anger. Below the surface of pain, below thought, below identity itself, something waited. Not yet, but soon. The first night had begun. The first night arrived without ceremony. Darkness did not fall so much as deepen, thickening around Odin like a slow tide. The worlds continued their quiet turning, but here, suspended beneath the branches of Yggdrasil, time began to behave differently. It stretched, it thinned, it lost its familiar edges. At first, Odin counted his breath, in and out. Slow, measured. The rope held firm. The branch above did not shift. Pain remained present, but contained, sharp enough to command attention, dull enough to endure. His body was still his own. His thoughts, though quieter, remained ordered. This was the easiest it would be. Hunger arrived gently, not as need, but as reminder. The body asking a simple question it had asked countless times before. Odin did not answer. He let the question pass unanswered, drifting away like a thought not worth pursuing. Cold followed hunger, creeping into his limbs. Fingers stiffened, muscles tightened, then slowly learned the stillness forced upon them. Every small movement carried weight now. Every adjustment echoed through his body. The tree remained unmoved. Above him, branches whispered in rhythms without language. Below him, roots vanished into darkness that offered no reflection. The familiar anchors of direction, up, down, near, far, began to blow. Suspended between realms, Odin existed in a space that did not invite orientation. Night 1 passed slowly. Thoughts came in fragments. Memories surfaced without sequence. A battlefield, a quiet hall, a voice long gone. Odin did not follow them. He let them rise and fade, one by one, like embers losing heat. Pain sharpened near dawn. Blood cooled. Muscles trembled. The spear wound reminded him constantly that comfort was no longer part of the world. Yet beneath the pain, something steadier emerged. A rhythm, an understanding of limits. The body, denied relief, began to conserve. The second night arrived without announcement. By now, hunger had changed. It was no longer a question. It was a presence, a hollowing sensation that reached beyond the body, into thought itself. Concentration thinned. Awareness drifted. Odin felt the pull of sleep, but sleep did not come. The rope allowed no rest. Every attempt to surrender consciousness ended in sharp correction. Pain returned him to the moment again and again. This, too, was part of the design. Isolation deepened. No voices reached him. No messengers arrived. Even the ravens did not appear. Whether they were absent or simply unseen, Odin could not tell. The worlds felt distant now, as if separated by more than space. For the first time, he felt truly alone. Not the solitude of leadership, not the distance of authority, but the absence of all mirrors. There was no one to observe him, no one to confirm his existence. Without witnesses, identity began to loosen. Odin felt his name grow lighter, less anchored. It still belonged to him, but it no longer defined him completely. During the second night, pain became less dramatic. Not weaker, but familiar. The body adapted in the only way it could, by dulling sensation, by narrowing awareness. Hunger grew heavier, slower, like a fog settling in. Time lost its meaning. Moments stretched unpredictably. An instant could feel endless. An hour could vanish without notice. Odin stopped counting. Numbers required effort, and effort was something to be spent carefully now. Instead, he listened, not with ears, with presence. The tree vibrated faintly, not movement, but tension. The quiet hum of connection. Every realm brushing faintly against another. Every choice, every life, every ending resonating through the structure of existence. Odin did not interpret the sensation. He endured it. By the third night, exhaustion reached deeper layers. Muscles weakened. Breath shallowed. The body's complaints softened into a constant background ache. Pain no longer arrived in waves. It became an environment. Thought began to fragment. Memories no longer followed logic. Faces blurred. Events overlapped. Odin noticed this without alarm. Confusion was expected. The mind, deprived of nourishment and rest, began to release its grip. This was not failure. It was transition. Hunger sharpened awareness, In strange ways, small sensations grew vivid. The texture of roke against skin, the movement of air along bark, the slow pulse within his chest. Everything necessary fell away. What remained was simple: breath, pain, stillness. Isolation completed its work quietly. Without conversation, without reflection, without response, thought turned inward until it met itself and dissolved. Questions lost urgency. Answers lost relevance. There was no one to impress, no outcome to anticipate, only continuation. Odin realized that much of what he had called self was built from interaction. Titles, stories, memory reinforced by repetition. Stripped of those reinforcements, the structure weakened, and beneath it, something more basic remained. Awareness without narrative. The third night passed without distinction from the second. Darkness was no longer something that arrived or departed. It simply existed. Cold no longer surprised him. Hunger no longer demanded attention. They were facts now, like gravity. At some point, Odin stopped resisting discomfort entirely. This did not remove it. It transformed it. Pain lost its sharpness when no effort was spent avoiding it. Hunger lost its urgency when no hope of relief remained. Isolation lost its threat when identity loosened its grip. Something in him yielded. Not surrender, release. The tree continued to hold him without acknowledgement. It did not reward endurance, did not respond to acceptance. It simply allowed the process to continue. As the third night drew on, something subtle shifted. The boundary between sensation and observer softened. Odin could no longer say with certainty where pain ended and awareness began. The distinction mattered less with each passing moment. He was not thinking about wisdom. He was not thinking about runes. He was simply there, suspended, enduring, present. The body weakened. The mind thinned, and in that thinning, space opened. Not yet filled, not yet revealed, but ready. The first nights had done their work. Hunger had stripped away excess. Isolation had loosened identity. What remained was quieter, lighter, less certain, and far closer to the threshold than Odin had ever been before. The fourth night waited. By the fourth night, Odin no longer measured time by darkness or light. There was only duration. The body still hung from the rope, still endured the pull of gravity, still breathed, but these facts no longer formed the center of experience. Sensation drifted in and out of awareness like distant weather, sometimes sharp, sometimes muted, often unnoticed. Pain had changed again, and no longer arrived as signal or warning. It had become texture woven into existence itself. Hunger, too, lost its voice. The body that ceased asking. It simply waited, conserving what little remained. Cold moved through him without resistance. Odin no longer fought it. Fighting required identity, and identity was loosening. Thoughts slowed, until they resembled echoes rather than statements. Memories surfaced without emotional weight. Faces appeared without names. Events lost sequence. Past and present blurred into a single, indistinct field. He did not try to hold on to them. Holding required effort. Effort required desire. Desire was fading. By the fifth night, Odin noticed something strange. He could no longer clearly remember when he had last been comfortable. The idea of warmth, of rest, of food felt abstract, like concepts learned rather than experiences lived. The body's history was receding. Sensation existed only in the immediate moment, stripped of comparison. This narrowing brought clarity. Without contrast, experience simplified. There was no longer better or worse, only what was present and what was absent. The tree continued to surround him. Yggdrasil's presence was no longer something he perceived with senses. It had become context, like silence around sound or darkness around stars. It framed everything without drawing attention to itself. Odin was no longer hanging from the tree. He was within it. The distinction mattered. Somewhere during the fifth night, Odin lost his name. Not dramatically, not suddenly. It simply stopped appearing. When thoughts arose, they did not attach to a center. There was no I to gather them. Awareness existed without ownership, observing without commentary. This absence did not frighten him. Fear required self-reference. Without a name, without story, without expectation, fear had nowhere to land. The rope crest into flesh. The spear wound pulsed faintly. Breath continued, shallow and slow. But these sensations floated freely, unattached to identity. Odin was not enduring pain. Pain was occurring. This shift changed everything. By the sixth night, even the idea of godhood had thinned beyond recognition. Power, once so central to his existence, felt irrelevant. Authority meant nothing without subjects. Knowledge meant nothing without a knower. What remained was presence without hierarchy. The worlds brushed faintly against one another through the tree. Odin sensed this, not as information, but as resonance, a vibration beneath perception. Every realm existing simultaneously, layered rather than separate. There was no boundary between observer and observed. This was not understanding, it was participation. Thought dissolved further, language unrattled, concepts lost their edges. Words like wisdom, sacrifice, and purpose slipped away, unable to survive without structure. In their absence, something quieter took their place. Stillness, not emptiness, not void. A fullness without content. Time no longer moved forward. It spread outward. Moments did not follow one another. They coexisted. Past sacrifices, future endings, present endurance, all folded together into a single continuous state. Odin did not think of Ragnarok. The end of all things had no meaning here. Beginnings and endings were constructs, useful only where separation existed. Within the tree, everything simply changed form. This realization did not arrive as insight. It arrived as acceptance. The sixth night deepened. The boundary between body and space softened further. Odin could not tell where his limbs ended and where the air began. Sensation diffused. Awareness expanded and thinned simultaneously. There was no longer effort involved in hanging. The rope existed. The branch existed. The body existed. But none of these required interpretation. At some point, Odin noticed that even observation was fading. Awareness no longer examined itself. It rested. This was the closest he had ever come to disappearance. And yet, something remained. Not identity, not memory, attention. Pure, directionless attention. It did not seek meaning. It did not demand explanation. It simply rested within what was unfolding. Yggdrasil responded, not by changing, but by allowing this state to deepen. The tree did not intervene. It did not reveal. It waited. Waiting here was active. The sixth night passed without distinction. If dawn came, it was irrelevant. If darkness remained, it went unnoticed. The cycle of day and night had lost authority. There was only continuation. In this space, something fundamental shifted. The self, at once reached for wisdom, no longer existed. The hunger that drove sacrifice had been dissolved, along with the identity that held it. What remained could not seek. And because it could not seek, it could receive. The dissolution was nearly complete. Not destruction, not loss. Transformation. The shape of Odin, God, King, Seeker, had thinned to transparency. What remained was a quiet readiness, free of expectation. The tree had done what it always did. It had removed what was unnecessary. As the sixth night came to rest, the silence deepened further. The space within awareness widened. There was no anticipation of what came next. And that was precisely what made the next phase possible. Beyond self, beyond endurance. Something stirred. The abyss was no longer distant. It was near. By the seventh night, Odin no longer felt that he was moving towards something unknown. Movement required distance, and distance required separation, and neither of those remained. There was no threshold ahead of him, no boundary waiting to be crossed. What had once seemed distant had always been present. Only his awareness had changed. The abyss was not darkness. Darkness still suggests the absence of something. This was depth, vast, unmeasurable, without surface or edge. It did not open before him, and it did not surround him. It simply existed, holding everything without effort or intention. There was no fear in it, no invitation either. The abyss did not threaten, and it did not welcome. It did not respond to presence, because presence was already within it. Odin did not observe it. Observation implies distance. Instead, awareness rested there naturally, as if it had always belonged. Thought no longer arose in any familiar way. There were no questions forming, no answers waiting. Language had lost its structure. Meaning no longer needed symbols. What remained was a quiet, directionless attention, awake but not seeking. During the seventh night, subtle movements began to occur within this depth. They were not visions, not images, not voices. They were patterns, slow and deliberate, unfolding without explanation. They did not communicate. They revealed themselves only through stillness, through the absence of resistance. Odin did not attempt to understand them. Understanding belonged to a self that no longer existed. Instead, Odin aligned with what unfolded, as water aligns with the shape of the riverbed, without effort or intention. The abyss was not a void. It was not empty. It was full without content, complete without form. It reflected nothing because there was nothing left to reflect. And yet, within that reflectionless depth, recognition occurred, not of self, not of identity, but of structure. The quiet structure beneath all becoming. Time no longer passed. It did not slow or stop. It simply lost relevance. The seventh night did not end so much as dissolve into the eighth. There was no transition to mark it, no change in sensation, only a deepening stillness, as if awareness itself had settled further into rest. By the eighth night, even the sense of being suspended had faded. There was no up or down, no hanging, no holding. The rope, the tree, the body remained only as distant impressions, no more central than the stars or the roots beneath forgotten worlds. In this depth, something began to emerge, not as a revelation, but as a resonance, a quiet alignment between awareness and the underlying patterns of existence. There were no symbols yet, no forms, only the sense that something was near, waiting for nothing. The abyss did not speak. It listened, and in that listening, the final resistance dissolved completely. There was no longer endurance, no longer sacrifice, no longer even surrender. There was only openness, total, effortless, unguarded. This was the space where nothing could be taken, and because nothing was taken, something could finally be given. The eighth night held its breath. The ninth night did not arrive as an event. It unfolded as inevitability. There was no signal to mark its beginning, no shift dramatic enough to be noticed at once. The abyss did not change, the tree did not move. Awareness simply rested where it had learned to remain, open and unguarded, emptied of effort. And because nothing more was being held, something could finally rise, not upward, not outward, from within the depth itself. The runes did not appear as symbols at first. They were not shapes, nor sounds, nor images. They emerged as structure, quiet, fundamental patterns revealing themselves not to the eyes, but to alignment itself. They were felt rather than seen, understood without thought, known without language. They had always been there, woven into the movement of existence, into growth and decay, into loss and return. What changed was not the runes. What changed was what remained of Odin. There was no self left to grasp them, no hunger left to demand them, no identity left to claim ownership. And because of this, the runes did not resist. They did not hide, they did not burn or overwhelm. They revealed themselves gently. One by one, patterns surfaced within the depth. each carrying a truth too simple to be spoken, too complete to be reduced. Not instructions, not spells, foundations. The rhythm of becoming, the inevitability of change, the balance between holding and letting go. Each rune was not knowledge added, but illusion removed. Not something learned, but something remembered from before remembering had form. Odin did not react. Reaction belonged to a self that no longer stood between awareness and what was revealed. There was only resonance, as if the deepest structure of existence recognized itself through him. Pain was gone now, not numbed, not overcome, irrelevant. The body still hung, but the body was no longer the center. Hunger had faded into silence. Cold had lost meaning. Time had no direction. Even the idea of survival had slipped away, unnecessary and uninvited. The runes did not promise power. They did not offer control. They revealed cost. To know was to carry. To see was to remember. To understand was to accept what could not be changed. This was the weight Odin had prepared for. Not glory, not dominance, responsibility. The patterns deepened, unfolding slowly, patiently, as if allowing awareness to rest between each recognition. Nothing was rushed. Nothing demanded attention. Each rune emerged when resistance was fully absent, when even curiosity had dissolved. In this space, wisdom was not sharp. It was heavy and calm. Odin understood now why the runes could not be taken by force, why they had never been stolen or conquered. They required emptiness. They required the surrender of self, so complete that there was no one left to misuse them. The ninth night held steady. The abyss did not close. The tree did not release him. Everything waited. At some point, without moment, without marker, the runes settled, not into Odin, but through him, like roots passing through soil, like wind moving through leaves without disturbing their shape. Knowledge was no longer separate from being. There was nothing left to endure. The sacrifice was complete, not because the suffering had ended, but because there was no longer anyone suffering. Only awareness remained. Quiet, clear, unburdened by desire. And in that stillness, something subtle shifted again. The runes did not stay fully revealed. They withdrew, not out of secrecy, but necessity. Their complete presence belonged to the abyss. To carry them into the worlds would require form, limitation, translation. That task would come later. For now, the ninth night rested in completion. The tree acknowledged nothing, and yet something fundamental had changed. The depth no longer felt infinite. It felt known, not mapped, not mastered, accepted. As the night reached its quiet end, sensation began faintly to return. Not sharply, not urgently. A distant awareness of weight, of gravity, of the rope still holding form, of the body still present at the edge of endurance. But Odin did not rush back into himself. Return, he understood now, must be as careful as surrender. Wisdom carried too quickly becomes distortion. So he remained still, letting the runes settle beyond thought, letting identity remain absent, letting silence complete its work. The ninth night did not conclude with triumph. It concluded with readiness. The tree still held him, the worlds still turned, and soon, slowly, there would be descent. But not yet. For a moment longer, everything rested. The descent did not begin with movement. It began with weight. After the ninth night, awareness slowly reintroduced the idea of form. Not abruptly, not with urgency. Sensation returned the way mist returns to a valley at dawn. Quietly, without announcement, gravity made itself known again, not as force, but as presence. The rope pressed. The body remembered itself. Odin did not rush to return. He understood now that wisdom carried too quickly fractures, that what has been seen in stillness must be allowed to settle before it can be born into the worlds. So he remained suspended for a time beyond counting, letting form gather gently around what had been revealed. The runes did not shine. They did not speak. They rested beneath awareness, folded into being, no longer separate from it. When the body finally shifted, it was not from effort, it was release. The rope loosened its claim. Whether by design or by time, it no longer held him. The branch did not resist. Yggdrasil did not intervene. The tree did what it had always done. It allowed. Odin fell. Not violently, not suddenly. He descended as one descends into sleep, guided not by control but by trust. The body moved downward, through air thick with silence, past bark etched with ages, past roots humming faintly with the memory of all that had passed through them. When he reached the ground, the impact was gentle. The earth received him without ceremony. For a long moment, he did not rise. The body lay still beneath the vast presence of the tree. Breath returned slowly, shallow at first, then steadier. Sensation gathered piece by piece. Cold against skin, the firmness of ground, the quiet ache of a body that had endured beyond familiarity. Pain returned, but differently. No longer an adversary, no longer the test, just information. Odin opened his eye. The world looked unchanged. The sky did not fracture. The tree did not glow. The realms did not pause to acknowledge what had occurred. Yggdrasil stood as it always had, ancient, silent, enduring. And yet, nothing was the same, because Odin was no longer the one who had approached the tree. He rose slowly, not as a god triumphant, not as a king renewed, but as something quieter, something heavier. The runes did not sit in his mind like tools waiting to be used. They settled deeper, woven into perception itself. He did not know more. He saw differently. Every movement of the world carried pattern. Every ending contained return. Every beginning already leaned toward loss. Not as tragedy, as structure. This was the gift. Not power, perspective. Odin did not speak of what he had seen. He did not carve runes immediately. He did not summon the gods to witness his return. Some knowledge, he understood, must be carried silently until the world is ready to hold it. He walked away from the tree without looking back. Yggdrasil did not follow him. It never had. As Odin returned to the realms, life continued unaware. Mortals slept and woke. Gods argued and feasted. Seasons turned as they always had. None of them knew what had been endured in stillness. None of them needed to. Wisdom does not announce itself. It waits to be recognized. In time, Odin would give the runes to the worlds, not in their full depth, but in form, marked into wood, spoken as sound, passed as story, enough for humanity to remember fragments of what lies beneath existence, enough to guide, not enough to dominate, because Odin now understood something essential. Wisdom that removes mystery destroys itself. So he gave humanity not answers, but tools. Patterns to reflect upon. Symbols to sit with. Runes that carried echoes of the abyss without opening it completely. A gift balanced carefully between knowing and not knowing. And then Odin returned to his place among gods. But he ruled differently. Silence became more valuable than speech. Listening more important than command. He no longer sought knowledge to escape the end. He understood now that the end was not something to be avoided. It was part of the design. The sacrifice had not made him greater. It had made him accurate. And that accuracy shaped everything that followed. As time moved on, as stories layered themselves over the quiet truth of what had happened, the image of Odin would change again. Warrior, wanderer, trickster, king, god of poetry and death. But beneath every version, the descent remained. The memory of hanging. The memory of dissolution, the memory of seeing without self. And when Odin looked upon humanity, he did not see weakness. He saw reflection. Creatures suspended between knowing and not knowing, between hunger and meaning, between fear and wonder, walking their own small versions of the same path, again and again across generations. He gave them the runes not to save them, but to remind them that wisdom is not found in comfort, that understanding is not free, that silence often teaches more than speech, and that beneath identity, beneath struggle, beneath the endless movement of the world, there is a structure that holds. Patient, enduring, quiet, like a tree at the center of all things. Odin carried that knowledge with him always, not as burden, as grounding. And so the story does not end with ascent or victory. It ends with return. A god stepping back into the world, changed in ways that cannot be seen, carrying a gift that can only be understood slowly, in stillness, by those willing to listen. And beneath it all, Yggdrasil remains, holding, waiting, as it always has. Now, there is nothing more that needs to happen. The story has reached its quiet end. And like all true endings, it does not close, it softens. The worlds continue to turn just as they always have. But here, beneath the great branches of Yggdrasil, time no longer asks anything of you. Imagine yourself resting at the base of the tree, You are not watching. You are not seeking. You are simply here. The bark rises slowly above you, ancient and unmoving, marked by ages that no longer hurry past. The branches stretch into shadow, carrying the memory of everything that has ever been endured and everything that has ever been released. There is no need to understand any of it. Wisdom does not demand attention. It settles when the mind becomes quiet enough to receive it. Your breathing slows naturally now. Each breath arrives without effort and leaves just as easily. The body knows what to do when it is no longer interrupted by thought. Muscles loosen. Weight sinks downward, supported fully by the earth beneath you. Nothing is expected. The story of Odin does not ask you to remember details. It does not ask you to carry meaning forward. Like all deep stories meant for the night, it works quietly, below awareness, where understanding does not need language. If thoughts drift in, let them pass like leaves falling from high branches. They do not need to be followed. They will settle on their own. The tree remains, patient, unmoving. Its roots run deep beneath you, steady and unseen, holding the worlds together without effort or intention. Above you, the branches sway gently, not in wind, but in rhythm. Slow, continuous, unbroken. Here, there is no hunger, no striving, no need to become anything else. The night is no longer something to endure. It is something that holds you. As sleep begins to arrive, it does not pull you away from the story. It completes it. Just as Odin released himself into stillness, you are allowed to let go now of tension, of effort, of the need to remain awake. Nothing important will be missed. The runes do not fade because they were never meant to be grasped. They remain beneath thought, woven into the quiet structure that supports rest, dreams, and renewal. Let your breath grow slower. Let the space between breaths widen. You are safe here, beneath the tree, held by something older than fear and quieter than thought. And as the story settles into silence, if you found calm here tonight, if this journey through dark mythology brought you rest, remember that you can return whenever you need to. If you wish to hear more stories like this, you can gently support the channel by liking this video and subscribing, so these quiet journeys can continue. For now, there is nothing else to do. The tree remains, the night deepens, and you are free to sleep.